each sign, there's 12 signs, there's 12 houses. Each house has its corresponding sign, and each sign has its corresponding house. So the signs would be like an energetic filter. At least that's how I think of it. They're an archetype which then blends its energy with the sun, the moon, and the planet that happens to be in there, to where the house would be an area of life. That's how it's traditionally taught. I personally have found that they can go either way. So a sign could show up as an area of life, and a house could show up like the energetic filter of the sign which it corresponds to.
Okay. And so moving on to Scorpio, which is October 23rd to November 21st. It's a fixed water sign ruled by both Mars and Pluto. I think typically Scorpio represents, and I think Scorpio is one of these signs that we've talked about, that in pop astrology gets a bad rap. But it's really about transformation and regeneration. Scorpio energy takes everything that is hidden and transforms it to heal wounds. I think that maybe that description is too specific, but I'm hoping you can kind of expand on it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's one of the more polarized of in the way it gets expressed. So people with Scorpio energy have an affinity to the dark side. And so that can show up as just being a dark individual who's, engaged in whatever unpleasant activities, or somebody who's able to be present and witness darkness. So in my opinion, the best therapists, healers, and detectives would have a prominent Scorpio energy. It gives you the ability to seek the truth. And that's very often the case with Scorpio energy is it wants the truth at any cost. It also wants depth and authenticity. So typically people with a lot of Scorpio energy are very adverse to superficial interactions, small talks, to where the Libra energy loves that stuff. I would say, as well as like any of the air signs, they're very much fine with any sort of interaction, and the Libra energy would be adverse to that really deep, truly honest type relationship that involves those really like intense bonds. So Scorpio energy can also, like within a relationship, can be quite intense, so they want it all, right? They want like a deep, profound connection. They want pure truth and authenticity, and they want your full attention.
It's definitely a more intense energy. And I think that's why it's gotten that kind of negative feeling with pop astrology. Okay, so moving on to the eighth house. The eighth house, I think the eighth house typically is thought of as the house of death, but it's really more about transformation, the cycles of death and rebirth. And like we talked about with the second house, it can be associated with inheritance, resources. I think the eighth house is also a difficult house to describe, so I'm hoping you can kind of give a better
I would agree that it is. I would say intense emotional experiences show up in the eighth house. So planets that are in the eighth house will have a certain quality of intensity to them and will stimulate intense emotional experiences. And in my opinion, those intense emotional experiences are what lead to transformation, to the extent that you're willing to experience them consciously and to fully experience them, will be the extent to which you're able to be reborn. And that's a process. So if you have planets in your eighth house, there's a good chance that you will be more prone towards really intense emotional experiences that perhaps will move you towards like more profound spiritual growth. Interestingly, in the eighth house as well as Scorpio, you also see inheritances. I've noticed people who work in finance tend to have Scorpio or eighth house prominent.